Final Fantasy VII is the 7th installment in the Final Fantasy series and was released in 1997 by Squaresoft. It was the first game of the Final Fantasy series to be developed for the PlayStation rather than a Nintendo system, and the first game in the series to be ported to Windows. Additionally, Final Fantasy VII was the first Final Fantasy title with entirely 3D polygonal character models, although the majority of environments were two-dimensional pre-rendered maps, except the world map and battle screens, which were rendered in full 3D. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most popular games of all time, with the highest sales, 10.5 million copies of any game in the Final Fantasy series, and the second highest sales for a game on the PlayStation platform. It received GameSpot's Editor Choice, scoring a 9.5 out of 10, and a 9.6 out of 10 user score. Since its debut on the Sony PlayStation, Final Fantasy VII has been released on the PC and later on the PlayStation Network. It is widely considered one of the most influential RPGs to date. Final Fantasy VII is a largely menu-driven role-playing game. Initially, the player is restricted to the city of Midgar, but as the game progresses, more and more of the fantasy world becomes accessible and the scripted adventures sequences gradually give way to greater freedom and opportunities to explore. At several points in the story, the game is interrupted by entirely scripted dramatic sequences, some of which are quite lengthy. Final Fantasy VII's skill system utilizes materia, magic orbs which can be placed in special slots on weapons and armor. Materia allows characters to access magic spells, special commands, and a variety of other abilities. Materia can be combined in a fixed number of ways, and strategic use of the materia combinations allow the player to use various tactics suiting their personal style of play. Final Fantasy VII also popularized the inclusion of very difficult optional bosses not required to complete the game, but rather to offer reward and challenge to the player. The story of Final Fantasy VII is as follows. An energy manufacturing mega company known as Shinra Incorporated is harvesting the sheer life energy of the planet, known as the life stream, as a simple fossil fuel. The life stream is processed and made into products ranging from electricity and heat to mako and materia. The latter two materials can work miracles, granting the wisdom of the ancients to the users. However, the life stream, like most other fuels, is not infinite in supply, and the planet's life force is being malevolently drained by the constant exploitation of mako by Shinra. Though aware of the harmful effects, they function without remorse. However, the real battle lies not with a corporation, but a force much more competent from the distant past. A long-thought dead warrior bent on becoming a god by draining all of the life stream from the planet has risen again and will stop at nothing to achieve his goal. Now a small rebel group emanating from the slums must quell the various dangers toward the innocent, and one mercenary for hire must look amidst the lies and deception to find a man he is within. The game was a critical and commercial success. It received glowing reviews from most video game magazines, and by 1999 the game had sold more than 8 million copies worldwide, with about 3 million in the first 48 hours of its release. It was one of the first console role-playing games to achieve widespread popularity outside of Asia, and the ongoing popularity of the title led Square Enix to produce a series of sequels and prequels under the collective title Compilation of Final Fantasy VII in the mid-2000s. Final Fantasy VIII is the 8th installment in the Final Fantasy series. The game is the second Final Fantasy developed for both PlayStation and the PC. It was made available as a PS1 classic over the PlayStation Network in Japan on September 24th, 2009, and in North America shortly after. 13 weeks after its release, Final Fantasy VIII had earned more than $50 million from sales in the United States, making it the fastest-selling Final Fantasy title at the time. Additionally, Final Fantasy VII was voted 22nd best game of all time by readers of the Japanese magazine Famitsu. Final Fantasy VIII went on to become one of the best-selling games in the series. The game had shipped 8.15 million copies worldwide as of March 31st, 2003. Final Fantasy VIII is a departure from many traditional series standards. It is the first Final Fantasy game to consistently use realistically proportioned characters, the first to feature a vocal piece as its theme music, and one of the only titles to deviate from the series' traditional means of increasing a character's power via leveling. In addition, it does not have a magic point-based system for spellcasting. Instead, magic is collected, drawn, and created from monsters and objects encountered throughout the game, and is used to power up the characters via the Junction system. Final Fantasy VIII's gameplay is vastly different from previous titles. The draw and junction systems are the most notable changes. Instead of leveling up in order to learn new spells and abilities via weapons or a job class, the player must draw the spells from enemies and draw points, hotspots gathered throughout the world containing random numbers of a specific spell. This eliminates the convention of magic/mana points, but encourages players to hoard and conserve spells both for direct use and for junctioning them to different stats associated with Guardian forces, also known as the summons for Final Fantasy VIII. The Junction system is the system used for boosting character stats and to give elemental or status effects to weapons and armor. The player must junction a Guardian force to enable the use of battle commands other than attack. Boosting stats requires character to obtain magic by drawing spells from enemies and draw points, and by refining from items with GF abilities. One of the new leveling and experience features in the game is that enemies and bosses have no set level. Although bosses do have level caps, they increase in hit points, statistics, and abilities alongside the player party. Final Fantasy VIII introduced a mini-game that can be played whenever there are NPCs around, a trading card game known as Triad. Triad varies from a simple, easy-to-play game to a complicated one. More rules and variations of other rules come into play depending on what area the player is playing in. And to complicate things further, rules played within one area are carried to other areas, so the player will want to be careful what rules to pick up while playing. Final Fantasy VIII's storyline can be summarized as so. At the forefront of a rising tide of violence brought on by Galbadia's war declaration is a seed cadet named Squall Leonhardt. Serious to a fault, Squall has earned himself the reputation of being a lone wolf. A chance encounter with the free-spirited Renoa Hartley, however, turns his universe upside down. Having thrived on discipline, Squall finds Renoa's carefree attitude fascinating. Yet there is no time to ponder these thoughts, for the job of dealing with the sorceress behind Galbadia's irritational hostility has fallen to Seed and Squall. In general, Final Fantasy VIII has been compared favorably to its predecessors. Though questioning the game's lack of voiceovers for its characters, Game Revolution praised its storyline and ending. For their part, Edge labeled Final Fantasy VIII a far more accomplished game than Final Fantasy VII. On the other hand, the Game magazine also felt that the game's length left its story unable to offer consistently strong dialogue and subplots. Overall, Edge considered Final Fantasy VIII to be yet another outstanding addition of Squaresoft's far from Final Fantasy series, summarizing it as aesthetically astonishing, rarely less than compelling, and near peerless in scope and execution. UGO.com stated that while no other game in the series had stirred the controversy that Final Fantasy VIII had, and that it was flawed, Final Fantasy VIII was a daring, groundbreaking game, decidedly the most original console-style RPG ever created. In 2002, IGN named the game the 7th best title for the PlayStation of all time, placing higher on the list than Final Fantasy VII, and described as taking all of its strong points and making them better.